So we are on our third week of exploring the book by Christian Sorensen, Living from the Mountaintop. Be the mystic you were born to be. If you have missed the first 2 weeks, they're available on YouTube and online at our website. And you can continue with us even if you're not from the area, because we both have our live stream, which is live every Sunday, and the archives. And we also have an online study group, though we have about 100 people participating in physical groups of 12 or under in homes and areas throughout Kansas City. So this week, we are exploring the idea of the intuitive mind and the rational mind. This music that we experience today is a great metaphor. A lot of times we have music with lyrics, with a lot of ideas already in them. But instrumental music and meditation music and intuitive music that is created on the spot and inspired is a different experience. It's a different experience of the mind. It surpasses and transcends the thinking mind and brings us into an experience that's original, experience that can't be duplicated, an experience where we pass our rational thinking. This week, Christian Sorensen dives into the idea that there are different realms of consciousness in which we can operate, and that if we're not completely awake or aware or on the spiritual path, we will go to whatever the default operation level is, whatever the default frequency is, whatever the default mind is. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, talked a lot about these realms of consciousness. There's even a word that is used in here, race consciousness, that Fillmore talked about years ago. That idea of a collective common race consciousness that is a base level thinking, almost a field of unconsciousness that exists among us. And the idea for this week is that we are meant for more than that mind. That mind is very ordinary, that mind is very human, that mind is very automatic. But there is a different mind that we can come from, and it is the collective mind. It is what we call the cosmic Christ consciousness, the cosmic anointed or awakened consciousness. It is known in advanced psychology and in spiritual traditions as the true self. And that is the self that is united with all other beings. William Blake said, "Mind has no body distinct from his soul. Man has no body distinct from his soul. For that called a body is a portion of soul discerned by the five senses, the chief inlets of the soul in this age." Christian talks about different intuitive ability and goes through and looks at what those are. And if you haven't taken a dive into the chapters, I really invite you to, because until someone poses possibilities for our minds, sometimes we're sitting in the midst of an ability, of an intuitive ability, of a spiritual gift, and we know nothing about it. We don't even know that we're having it. We don't even know we experienced it. Have you ever had that? Have you ever had something that you think you know what it's about, until someone gives you a different experience of it, opens a window in a way that's not telling you about it, but actually opening a portal to something that was beyond. You just couldn't even conceive that it was there. That's what he's talking about here when he talks about clairsentience, which is clear feeling, clear audience, clear empathy. He's talking about our abilities, and there are many, to tune in on different levels that go beyond the rational mind. It is for each of us to explore these levels and these arena of gifts. He talks about telepathy and thought transference. He says, if you have this gift, you're able to see the possible unfoldment of uninterrupted scenes and know true motives for people's actions. You can even connect with those in other realms. It's something that we don't talk a lot about day to day in our work life and our world life. But can you believe in the possibility that there is more in this field of existence right here than we could ever even imagine, that we could ever even realize? When we experience music up here, it comes to our ears, but we can't see it. We can't see it traveling or swimming or flying like a bird from an instrument to our ears, yet we're so used to knowing about that because someone discovered it, someone explained it, someone could explain light particles and wave particles, so somehow our rational minds go, okay, well, that's happening, and it's not weird anymore because sound travels. I get that now. But what else is in this field that is available to us, that's beyond our rational mind, our scientific ability to understand, even beyond what we might know in this moment is our intuitive ability to get? Christian Sorensen quotes a poet who said, "Go into yourself and see how deep the place is from which your life flows." Go into yourself and see how deep the place is from which your life flows. He says to get beyond the five senses, you must move from thinking through the brain to perceiving through the heart. You must move from thinking through the brain to perceiving through the heart. Now, this is not to say that the brain's not useful. It's not to say that we don't use our brains to think. God help us if we didn't utilize all of our faculties. But it is to say that that is not the place to make the authority. That the brain or the mind is here to be a servant, not a master. I'll say that again. The brain or the mind is here to be a servant, not a master. You would never program a computer once and let it run your whole life without putting in new input. You would never let your car or some device on your car tell you where to drive or what to do without interacting with it and without becoming its master and directing it. You remember when GPSs were new? Like you had the little Garmins, right? You remember that? When they were brand new. I'm telling you, it said go straight, and I went right through a red light. There were times when I knew which way to go, but it said another way, and it was like, ah. If we just let it automatically tell us what to do, we're not operating skillfully or mindfully, and we are far under our capacities, no? He says, the authority of your soul doesn't require evidence. The authority of your soul, when you come from that heart space, when you come from the heart center, when you live life from this space, it doesn't require what the mind requires. See, the mind is programmed to shut down when things don't make sense. It is programmed to get evidence, to get validation, to have an idea, to have something that is born in it, and then start building around that, start attaching. And in fact, if you know about psychology and educational learning, you realize that there is a zone of proximal development, and if someone is trying to operate beyond their zone of proximal development, if there is more coming to them than they have the framework to conceive of, it will be lost on them, as if they have never read it, as if they have never heard it, as if they have never learned it. Have you ever picked up a book at one point in your life and said, what is this? Like, all right, people are liking this. I don't know. Maybe you're doing it with this one. And you're going, other people are going, oh my God, this book. And you're like, whatever. I did that once with A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, the first time I read it, I was like, I like The Power of Now better. And I've picked it up over and over and over again since that, and I never pick it up without being completely floored. I never pick it up without being completely absorbed in its consciousness and getting a whole nother level or layer, or hearing it like it's poetry, hearing it like it's a song that is singing to my soul in unfolding layers. But if we don't have something to attach to the learning that we're getting, the only thing that can transcend that limit is pure experience, is original, firsthand, soul-transforming, life-altering experience. Because you know what the ego does? It will argue with reason, it will argue with words, it will argue with science, it will argue with facts, it will certainly argue with other people, right? Loves that. But it never argues with experience. And that is the mystical journey. That is the soul unfoldment that is possible with a spiritual practice. He says intuitive awareness comes from levels beyond rational information. Are we willing to entertain the possibility of living beyond rational information? Are we willing to trust ourselves and to explore the idea that we could get things we don't have the education level to get? We could understand things that are beyond our comprehension. We could intuit things that were never overtly shared with us. I was thinking about scripture lately, and there's all these ideas about the Bible. Some people love it, some people hate it. And even in Unity, we take the Bible metaphysically and we explain that, and we explain that we describe the Bible as being the evolution of consciousness from Adam mind, or your carnal mind, to Christ mind, or the awakened consciousness. And that if we dive into it in that realm, if you dive into it with the idea like you might do dream interpretation, that you might look at symbolism, that you might look at, this is not just a text for 2,000 years ago, this is not just a text about other people at another time where all the women have been edited out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is actually a sacred text that is alive, that is living, that has stories for the evolution of consciousness. Even when we look at it like that, we sometimes fall short of recognizing that this collection of stories, this collection of scripture, came from different individuals. And it is a freaky collection. It is this wild, like unhinged, unleashed. People had to be insane even to put it together. And at least we're in a Unity, we can say people put it together. We're fortunate about that. If you don't know that yet, you can see me after the service and I'll help you through that. Sorry. We just kind of let that slide in there like it's nothing. But we recognize the Council of Nicaea and Unity. You don't have to leave any part of you behind. You can bring all your intellectual reasoning into the sanctuary, into the consciousness. But we sometimes don't see that it is a collection of Pat's highest ability to take a dream that came to her, an idea that came to her, a story or a vision, and put it into words. That it is Lynn and Charles sitting there moving through a concept, moving through a spiritual idea at such a level that they get a story, and this story comes alive, and they recognize that if we share this story and we pass it on to our children and our grandchildren, to our community, to all beings, to the women, to the men, to the people of the future, if they really listen to the words of this story, they can get awakening. We fail to recognize sometimes that there may be a poem that came from Vern and Carol as they're experiencing the immense gifts and light in their life, and they put it to song and to words, something that is so vulnerable and so real and so palpable, yet so incomprehensible. But instead of keeping it for themselves, they decided to put it into words and lift it into a book, into a scripture, and offer it out to the world. And that somehow this collection of people's visions, dreams, experiences, insights, experiences of other people, telling of stories, came together in this mystical way and is still around today. That's a whole lot of people who allowed themselves to have experiences beyond reason. There are some things that Charles Fillmore talked about in his day before real psychology was even around. But he intuited and he got frameworks and ideas about the self and the human condition and the spiritual condition that later we call science and psychology. But he didn't have words for it. These were people intuiting their mystical experiences and allowing them to come to the best of their ability through the words available to them in the consciousness they were in at the time. So there are many realms of mind and realms of exploration. He talks a little bit in this book about the psychic realm. And if you haven't read this yet, it's interesting because a lot of people don't know this, but Charles Fillmore said the same thing. He said, Christian says, the psychic realm is not the same as the mystical realm. The psychic realm is not the same as the mystical realm. We can be very entranced by the psychic realm. If you've ever had someone read for you or do any sort of intuitive thing for you and they get something that you just know, like, I don't even know how you could know that. There's no way you could know that. It can be life-altering. But we can also get stuck in it. We can get stuck in it thinking it is the path to the mountaintop. It is the highest consciousness available. It is the full realm of divine mind. And Charles Fillmore said, be mindful, no, it isn't. It is one aspect of it, and it is a realm that we move through, and certainly a realm of immense and intense spiritual gifts. And if anything, that realm is one to remind us that there is so much more here than meets the eye. Remind us that we have abilities and languages that we may not have even explored yet. He says the psychic realm isn't the mystical realm at all, and there's a chasm between the two. He says people dabble in the subjective field and get stuck going parallel while becoming addicted to their newfound abilities. The mystical realm is a vertical trip, transcending through this realm, accessing the all-knowing, merging with life itself. And while it sounds like, in words, it's a place to travel to, there's nowhere to go and nothing out there. You are present in the all-present, here and now. I think one of the reasons they go into that idea and that exploration is because there are realms where we can abdicate our power. There are realms where we can stop developing our own abilities and where we can become fixated on someone else's gifts and trying to bring someone else's gifts to us and selling out on our own life's directive, which is to move and live and act from the highest consciousness available to us in every moment. Now, that doesn't make one wrong, but never, never, never does the universe want you to stop developing your own spiritual practice and exploring your own intuitive abilities, living, in fact, your own life. And the ego, the mind, even our sweet self, sometimes wants to do anything and everything to say, someone else take the wheel. On this one, could someone else take the wheel? On this one, could someone else just validate that? could someone else just make me a little more sure I can listen to my own intuition, that I'm on track, that I'm getting it? Have you ever done that? Asked someone if you're getting it right? When we stop short of developing our own intuitive abilities, we can become part of what is seemingly a hypnotized existence. And that's what they refer to as the race consciousness. The realm where we're a little bit asleep at the wheel, we're programmed and we're programmable. Does anyone think they're not programmable? It's just part of how we're wired. I'm pretty sure it was in Freakonomics, the book Freakonomics, where they talk about how the mind, even if we think we're open, how we can be so close-minded, and we can actually not even see evidence that is all around us. Because we fixate. That's just what the mind does. It fixates on what it thinks is coming. It looks for evidence and what it wants to verify. That's one of the reasons the law of mind action is so powerful. That's one of the reasons why we teach in unity. If you believe it, if you think it is, it is. If you want to hold on to it and make an agreement with a limitation, go for it, because it's going to be real. Prayer is not so much launching something saying, oh, please let it happen to me. Prayer is making an agreement with something, because when you make an agreement with something, you will create and find and generate and draw to you evidence that it is truth. So be careful of your agreements. We tend to define things with the mind. We define things as good or bad. We look for what's real and unreal. And we sometimes give away our own intuitive abilities and export them to what Charles Fillmore called the race consciousness. He says this about race consciousness. He says, the human race has formed laws of physical birth and death, laws of sickness and physical inability, laws making food the source of bodily existence, laws of mind that recognize no other source of existence except the physical. The sum total of these laws forms a race consciousness separate from and independent of creative mind. When creative mind sought to help men spiritually, the mind of the flesh opposed it and made every effort to solve the problems in its own way. This is the Garden of Eden. He said the great need of the human family is mind control. Jesus showed us that mastery is attained through realization of the power of spirit. The great need of the human family is mind control. I'm going to share with you part of Christian's reading about mind control, and it's interesting that he even uses the same words. He says, the scrambled brain waves of today make the fight for one's mind control of utmost importance. Blurred and blocked, a higher awareness has been relegated to the back of the line, while your mistaken sense of self embraces your rather warped states of thoughts as to who you really are. This confused embrace of the truth of who you are can cause emotional upheaval, he says, as well as physical challenges when accepting the way of the physical world as the highest reality. The accumulation of subconscious mental impressions along with physical evidence can influence you into believing this is the truth. With paradoxes at hand, not to mention the pull of earthly motion, your intellect is rendered useless in finding the mystical. Experiencing life itself is your spirit's assignment, not your head's undertaking. with change often being the outcome of an intuitive directive from a higher frequency. The rational mind, which, by the way, deplores change, will tell you to stop listening to that channel. It will prompt you instead to turn your attention to a different area of your life. This is me inserting it. It's like fixing your kitchen instead. Going shopping. Turning off the TV. Next comes the clash between your lower self in the frequency from its known world, which wants to keep you in familiar territory, and your higher connected self, who perceives options from the mountaintop. Your higher self is pulling you with guidance towards a greater expression you've not yet realized, while your lower self pushes you towards the lower vibrations you are already familiar with. This conflict is waiting to happen through the controlling domain of your physical form. You are always being called to reclaim your life force. We are always being called to reclaim our life force. So how do we begin to do that? First, we have to recognize that we live, move, and have our being within a field of unseen frequencies, unseen energies, and unseen potential. He goes on to tell us that your intuitive and reasoning selves are at constant odds. Now, you can see why in Scripture and before the creation of psychology, we have ideas that emerged like the devil, like evil and good, duality, like a push and a pull. Because the psyche needs a way to understand this. It sounds like a war, doesn't it? And in spiritual truth, there is never a war, there is never an opposition. But in analysis, in reasoning, sometimes that is the concept through which we understand our true nature. He says that Nikola Tesla wrote, "If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. When your awareness is in sync with the human body, you become an amazing receiving station and able to pick up the subtleties your brain never suspected were even present." He goes on to talk about when you enter this realm, when you enter into vibration, you start asking yourself different questions, you start judging things differently, and there are different things you become aware of. He says multitudes of unseen frequencies in the astral world exist right alongside it. You may delude yourself into believing you're alone and untouched by these frequencies, where you are sitting quietly reading this book. But there are electromagnetic frequencies impacting you and me right now. They're everywhere, all the time. There was a time I was living in Tahoe after college, and Tahoe is, very pristine. You've got the water, you've got the mountains, and it was a very calm life. And I was there, and I had one sister there with me, and then my other sister lived in San Francisco. And this was before I had any idea about what my intuitive abilities were. And I would take that drive from Tahoe to San Francisco to see the sister, and my whole being would change. When I was in San Francisco, it was like I couldn't explain it. I just described it like I just don't like it. I know everyone's supposed to like it. I'm supposed to love it, but I just hate it here. And I'm not saying anything against San Francisco. But it took me a while to realize how much was in the field. And I started describing it like, it's like there are TVs plugged in and I can hear them all going on. It's like there's a bunch of stuff in the air and I can feel it. Like I can hear all the conversations without knowing the details. I can feel everything plugged in. I can feel it all, and it's too much and it's overwhelming. And when I would get back to Tahoe, it was like there was a peace and a calm again. I lived in New Jersey for about 5 years before coming back here to Missouri. And in New Jersey, though I absolutely loved it, I adored the people, and New Jersey gets a bad rap. It's an incredible state. It was right outside of New York City, which I loved. I could get on the bus and in 20, 30 minutes be right in the city. But something happened to me there. It was like little by little I got jacked up and jacked up and jacked up and jacked up to the point where I always felt like there were a million things on my mind. It was like, well, I'm still a little bit like this, but it was like having 50 million Post-it notes stuck in your brain inside of your body, and everyone's reading them to you all the time. And even when there was nothing going on, even when I knew there was no logical reason, like there's nothing on my list, I have nothing to do today, my being could not experience that. And it took about a year after getting back here before I could feel that almost neurologically settle back down. Do you realize you are affected by things, by fields of energy that we often know very little about? You may feel it when you walk into a room and the hair on the back of your neck stands up. When you see someone or when you're around someone, you may feel it as a pulse to not be around someone. You may feel it as a magnet to draw yourself to someone that your mind says, no, 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 no. But somewhere inside it's going, yeah. Are we willing to live not from the reason of the mind that is faulty, that can be arrogant, that can be limited, but from the heart? That is the intuitive realm of knowing, the intuitive space where we know what we know and we don't have to argue with reasons. He says to us, the most important question to ask yourself is, do you listen? Do you listen? Because we are all certainly affected by these frequencies, and we all certainly have these gifts. Are we willing to explore them? Are we willing to affirm them? We train them out of our children at very young ages. From the first moment a child intuits something's wrong with a parent, something's wrong in an environment, something's wrong in a space, and we say, no, 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 everything's okay. Go back to bed. There's nothing going on. We shut it down. When we think there are conversations that are too big to have, so we hold them back, we slowly start chipping away at those intuitive knowings. Can we instead find ways to tell the truth in an appropriate manner? It's beautiful that you're picking up on something, honey. It's beautiful that you're picking up on something. And yes, there's something here. Not do it because I said so. Do you know that that makes children unintelligent? To say, because I said so. It lowers a child's intelligence rather than affirming who they are and giving them their version of the truth that is in integrity, but also is at the level of appropriate sharing. There is always a way to tell the truth. Can we turn that around and do that for ourselves? Can we reparent ourselves and reprogram our own minds? Eckhart Tolle talks about resisting the moment and the tension that is created when we're out of a field of harmony with what is. He says, always say yes to the present moment. What could be more futile, more insane than to create inner resistance to what already is? What could be more insane than to oppose life itself, which is now, always now? Surrender to what is, say yes to life, and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you. So friends, can we say yes to our intuitive gifts? Can we say yes to exploring on a whole nother level? Can we say yes to trusting the heart's intelligence and letting that be the captain and allowing the mind to take its rightful place as a servant. Namaste.